Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The majestic restaurant stood like a jewel in the heart of Manhattan. Its glass facades offered glimpses of the sumptuous interior, sparkling crystal chandeliers suspended from the ceiling, immaculate tablecloths on every table, and impeccably uniformed waiters gliding silently among the guests. The air was filled with a blend of refined scents, truffle, vanilla, and the woody notes of vintage wines. Everything exuded luxury and prestige. That evening, Lila Johnson, a 26-year-old black waitress, was finishing her shift behind the bar. Her nimble hands precisely wiped the glasses, while her mind wandered, lost in childhood memories where the piano was her greatest passion. Every time she passed the restaurant's black Steinway, a thrill of excitement coursed through her. But in this world of privilege and appearances, music was never considered a real career for someone like her. Lila knew her role: to serve with a smile, anticipate customers' needs, and remain invisible to those who believed her place was simply behind the bar. Yet, that evening, she would be brutally reminded that, sometimes, wealth and power can be used as weapons to humiliate. Alexander Whitmore entered the restaurant. Everything about him exuded power: a perfectly tailored suit, a solid gold watch, a confident stride. His cold eyes swept the room, settling on Lila. He smiled, a calculated, cruel smile, ready to turn the evening into a demonstration of his power. He had heard about the young waitress, and an idea immediately came to mind: to humiliate her in front of everyone. As Lila placed a tray near her table, Alexander stared at her and said in an icy but polite tone, "Miss Johnson, you play the piano, don't you? Come and show us what you can do." A murmur rippled through the room. The patrons leaned forward, intrigued by the scene unfolding. Lila felt a mixture of anger and fear surge through her. She knew exactly what this man wanted. But beneath the tension, a silent determination stirred within her. Tonight, she would decide whether she would let herself be crushed by arrogance, or whether she would prove, to herself and to the world, that her talent was worth more than prejudice. Alexander's eyes shone with anticipation. He believed the young waitress would fail, that he would entertain his guests at the cost of another's humiliation. But he was unaware of a crucial truth: Lila's music knew neither fear, nor racism, nor contempt. And when she laid her hands on the piano, the true lesson of the evening would begin. Lila approached the piano with calculated slowness, aware that all eyes were now on her. Each step echoed on the majestic's gleaming parquet floor, amplifying her presence despite herself. Murmurs grew louder, some customers exchanging curious glances, others impatient, almost amused by what they perceived as a ridiculous scene. Alexander Whitmore settled comfortably into his armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a cruel smile on his lips. He leaned towards his guests and said mockingly, "You'll see, this young lady claims to know how to play. Let's hope it's not a disaster." Lila felt the sting of his words, but instead of faltering, she took a deep breath. Her mind focused on a single thought: music was her strength, and she belonged to no one. She sat down on the piano bench, placed her hands on the keys, and closed her eyes for a moment. Silence fell in the room. Even the murmur of the waiters had ceased, as if time had stood still. Then she pressed the first key. A clear, pure note rose, carrying away all the tension in the room. The murmur subsided. Some guests frowned, surprised by the unexpected beauty of the sound. Alexander Whitmore, for his part, barely frowned, but his sly smile was already beginning to crack. Lila played the notes with fluidity, each movement of her fingers telling a story of resilience and passion. The piece she performed was a blend of melancholy and power, a silent demonstration of everything she had been through. The guests' eyes widened in fascination. The first tentative applause erupted after a few bars, but soon the entire room was captivated by her playing. Alexander felt his position waver. What he had planned as a moment of domination and humiliation was transforming into a dazzling display of talent. His guests, who had expected laughter, were now captivated. Lila had turned the tables with ruthless grace. As she finished her first piece, she straightened slightly, letting her eyes discreetly scan the room. The silence that followed was heavy, yet respectful. Alexander, unable to hide his frustration, tried to regain his composure. "Well, I didn't know," he stammered, but his words were lost in the admiring murmur of the guests. Lila rested her hands on her knees, breathing calmly. She had understood something fundamental: true power lay not in money or arrogance, but in courage, self-control, and dignity. And tonight, she had just proven it to everyone. Lila took a deep breath and let her fingers once again brush the piano keys. This time, she wasn't just playing for herself, but for every judgmental gaze, for every prejudice that had been imposed upon her. Her music became a language, telling stories of struggle, shattered dreams, and resilience. The first notes rose in the room with unexpected power. The guests, captivated, fell completely silent. Even the discreet murmur of the waiters had vanished. The sounds of the piano filled every corner of the majestic, shimmering in the crystal chandeliers and resonating on the polished parquet floor. Alexander Whitmore frowned. He had anticipated a simple moment of ridicule, but what he was witnessing was much more than that. The room, initially ready to mock, was now captivated. The guests exchanged astonished glances, some whispering amongst themselves. "Who would have thought she would play so well? It's incredible." Lila played with raw emotion, each note conveying her inner strength and undiminished dignity. She glided into subtle improvisation, transforming a simple classical piece into a personal statement of power and grace. The timid applause at first grew into quiet cheers, crescendoing as her performance reached its climax. Alexander felt his control slipping away. His cruel smile had vanished, replaced by palpable tension. He tried to straighten up, to make a gesture or a comment to regain control, but every effort seemed futile against the magic unfolding before his eyes. A waiter, who had been watching from the shadows, whispered, "She's incredible." And it was true. Lila, a humble waitress from Manhattan, had just transformed what should have been her humiliation into a moment of collective wonder. Alexander Whitmore, despite his wealth and influence, was now a powerless spectator of a talent he could not deny. When Lila finished her piece, the room fell silent for a moment, captivated by the essence of what she had just created. Then, a thunderous applause erupted. The patrons rose to their feet, some even nodding their heads in respect, while others captured the moment on their phones. Alexander, red with anger and humiliation, muttered something incomprehensible in an attempt to save face, but no one was listening. The evening he had envisioned as a display of power and arrogance had turned into a resounding triumph for Lila. She bowed slightly before the piano, a discreet smile on her lips. She knew that tonight, her life had just changed, not through money or prestige, but through the unshakable power of her talent and dignity. Lila rose from the piano after her last note, her face calm but filled with a newfound confidence. She didn't need to say a word to command respect, every note she played spoke for itself. The entire room was now at her feet, captivated by her talent and the silent power of her presence. Alexander Whitmore, red with frustration, nervously wrapped the arm of his chair, desperately searching for a way to regain control of the situation. He had imagined the mocking laughter, the amused glances of his guests, but instead, he was met with admiration and respect, and worse still, most of the guests were now casting reproachful looks at him. "Well," he stammered, his voice trembling, I didn't know that you." His words were lost in the hubbub of applause and exclamations of wonder. Lila, unperturbed, gave him a look full of dignity. She didn't need to belittle him with words. His music had already done all the work. Guests approached to congratulate her. Some were whispering, "That's incredible, I've never heard of that before. She should be playing in a concert, not serving here." Even the restaurant staff, daily witnesses to her efforts, felt a deep pride in her. Lila had transformed what should have been a humiliation into a resounding triumph, proving that true worth was not measured by money or status, but by passion and mastery. Alexander tried to slip away discreetly, but his guests, still in shock, couldn't ignore Lila's radiance. Some exchanged knowing glances, judging the billionaire for his arrogance. Lila turned to them, smiling but humble, and simply said, "Music has nothing to do with power or money. It knows neither hatred nor prejudice." Each word resonated in the room, like an echo of silent justice. Lila had gained more than respect. She had taught a lesson in humility to a man who believed that everything could be bought, even the dignity of others. Alexander, sitting there helpless and red with shame, finally understood that his attempt at humiliation had backfired. Tonight, he was no longer the master of the room, Lila was. And as she returned to her place behind the bar, murmurs of admiration continued to ripple through the room. A simple and undeniable truth had taken hold: true greatness is not measured by money, but by the ability to transform adversity into triumph. The next day, the video of Lila's performance had gone viral on social media. The footage showed her focused face, her hands gliding across the piano, and the astonishment on Alexander Whitmore's face. Internet users quickly dubbed her Manhattan's prodigy waitress, and admiring comments poured in. "How graceful! A raw, magnificent talent. She deserves the biggest concert halls." Lila, for her part, remained humble. She had never sought fame. Her only goal had been to stay true to herself and her passion. But life finally seemed to be offering her the chance she had long dreamed of. The restaurant's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Invitations to play in prestigious New York venues, interviews with local media, and even a proposal to record an album had started pouring in. Lila knew that night at the Majestic had changed the course of her life. Alexander Whitmore, meanwhile, faced a storm of criticism. Articles spoke of his arrogance and his humiliating attempt to belittle a talented waitress. His social media accounts were flooded with mocking comments and messages of support for Lila. He had tried to use his wealth as a weapon. He had been defeated by talent and dignity. In the Majestic, customers were still coming to talk about Lila, some congratulating her in person, others asking to see her perform again. She smiled, grateful but aware that this triumph was the result of her perseverance, her discipline, and her courage in the face of arrogance. One evening, as she played softly for her regular customers, she reflected on how far she had come. Music, this passion she had nurtured in secret, was now recognized and celebrated. She hadn't just won the evening, she had proven that dignity, talent, and courage can triumph over power and wealth. And in Lila's heart, a certainty took hold: no matter the obstacles, no matter those who try to humiliate or diminish, authentic talent and true passion always end up shining. The waitress at the Majestic was no longer simply Lila. She had become a recognized artist, an inspiration, and living proof that humiliation can never crush a free and talented spirit.